Well, I'm glad you guys are here today. There's some others going to be coming in, but we're going to start right now. Last week we focused on enjoying your kids. And a couple of you weren't here last week, so I just really want to say that the first role in parenting is to remember why you became a parent. You didn't become a parent out of a have to. Now there are unplanned pregnancies, and there are things that we do at times. We adopt, we foster, we do different things that you didn't plan and want necessarily, but you wanted to give your heart. But when you have a child, usually you're excited about it. We celebrate that, and you got to remember that spirit when you're parenting. You started this because there was something in you that wanted expression. There was something in you that was driving to say, there's more. There's something driving in you that says this can be better. The world can be better. And so you're having a child is an expression for you to say to God, you do all things well. You made a good world, and we wanted to bring more people into it that will do good. So anyway, I can't overstate that point enough. So enjoying your kids is huge because they know if you're tolerating them. Mm-hmm. They know. You know if your husband's tolerating you, ladies. You know when he loves you. You can sense it, and when he's enjoying you. And that's important to know. And so that's why Scripture tells us that God is the unifier. We are one in Him. We are in Christ, who is in just I want them to know that they are in you, they are in me, and we are in this thing together. It's critical. And our children need to know that same thing. It's a great prayer to pray for your children. You didn't have children to launch them out and get rid of them. You launch them. You're launching them to do good, but they're extending your life. That's what they're doing. And we need to really, really drill down on that. So I want to ask you a question. Did you enjoy your kids this week? Yes. Did anybody do anything cool with your kids that made you enjoy them? Yeah. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just talk.
We signed up them for activities, so I got to take Violet to T-ball, and that was really fun just to spend time with her one-on-one. And we went out to McDonald's afterwards. It's like a little dinner treat, so that was fun.
That's good. That's a great illustration. And matter of fact, when we get down to observation number 3 and 4, you're right in the wheelhouse when you just talk about what you did just there. That's great. Anybody else? You enjoyed your kids this week? Do anything special?
We took ours out for dinner to have the college planning discussion with our oldest.
Speaking of launch. Yeah, by the way, you're always launching your kids. Launching doesn't mean when they leave home for good, when they're 18, 21, whatever. You're always launching your kids. You launch them into T-ball. You launch your kids into track. You launch your kids into tech, doing this to that. This is so cool. So we're always launching. So you have to remember that if you don't enjoy it, you're just checking off tasks. You don't want to do that. You really want to say, this is good. And if you don't remember the joy, you'll get worn out, you'll get beat up, and you will start seeing your kids as an obligation instead of as an opportunity and a blessing.
Speaking of that, when I took Violet to T-ball, she can be very shy at first, as I'm sure you guys know, and she didn't want to do it. And I was just like, I'm just going to go out there with her and just like have fun with her. And I got a little dirty, but by the end of it, she was like laughing, having fun. She wasn't like glued to my leg as much anymore. And I was telling Drew, because we had the same issue with Thomas when he did T-ball. He was like, did not want to go out on his own, and it was very like hard for Drew and I think, to kind of like wrestle with like, what do we do? And I was just like, I'm just gonna go out there with her, and I don't care like if the other parents see me do it. I don't care if the coach, if I bother him or whatever. And it was just, I was just like, I'm gonna have fun with her and be with her and make sure that she's having fun and not put like pressure on her. And that made it easier for me to have fun with her.
Great illustration. And I don't know if other parents looked at that and had fun watching you do that. And maybe they thought, I wish I'd done that. Mm-hmm. Because I tell you what you could do. You could do that totally belly up and say, you got to get out there. You got to do this. We paid money for this. And you know what? At that point, you've lost it all. You have no voice for your child.
That's kind of what we did with Thomas, I think. And when Drew and I would like reflect on it, we were like, well, we're not going to do that the next time. You know, like we want Thomas to have fun, and we want to have fun. So.
Parenting is a learning experience.
Yeah.
And experience is the best teacher, and pain really gets your attention. You know, when you have those things going on. That's right. Anybody else have fun before we get into our time today? Did you enjoy your kids? Thank you, Trey. Yeah.
we got a new board game, and we enjoy playing games, so we really had fun just figuring out how that mechanics work.
That's fantastic. Good stuff. Well, here, let's move into this thing here. And remember, please remember, some of you are taking notes, and I'm going to pass out notes at the end. I'm not giving them ahead of time, because this isn't about a curriculum. This is about you are an experience. You're not just having an experience, you are an experience. What you did yesterday, you were an experience for your daughter, and you had one. When you realize you are an experience, you can start having. Because you realize things will happen. It elevates your expectations when you realize I'm experiencing life. I'm not just getting through it, I'm experiencing it. And I can make it be what it needs to be here. And that's how you change bad things into good things. And you know, it doesn't change the thing, it changes us. That's what it does. And that's so powerful. So, observation number 2. Observation number 1, enjoy your kids. Observation number 2 is be a calming influence. You just gave a great illustration of that, Cora. You know, you said, look, don't dump, don't pour, don't deposit or take out your anxiety about your life through your kids. The world. Don't take that out on them. Don't pour it out. Big lesson. Some of you have done it, some of you will do it. Teaching a kid how to drive. Kid says, I want to get my learning permit, you know. And you know, first time you get in a car with a kid, boy or girl, who's getting ready to drive, you have no idea the anxiety they're feeling on there. They're excited, but also they're going like, wait. Look at all these knobs. All of a sudden, all the things they saw from over here look very different when you're behind the steering wheel. And they go like, you know, they have to go through a checklist. Do you have to set the seat right? What do? You make sure you got the seatbelt on? You know, and with the technology today, look at the backup. You know, you got to do all these different things. And they're going like, huh. Now, you know what you can do? You can sit in that other seat and go like, come on, man, you see it all the time. And you know what that does? Boy, that just does not give a calming influence. And your interaction needs to be, don't have a bad wreck. I mean, you know, that's time not to be calm at that moment, okay? That might be time to do that. But listen, when you help your kids learn to drive, it's a great analogy for helping be a calming influence in life. Because what you want to do, you can stay calm when you know what the procedure is, when you know what your kids ought to be doing. But that means you need to be enjoying your kids. Once you know who they are, you'll kind of see how they might respond to different things. So there's a lot of anxieties that come from learning to drive at first. I know the first time I took the car out, a 1959 Chevy, and this is in 1971. So how old is this story? But I live in a town that had a lot of hills in it, and it had a H 3-speed with a clutch, you know, manual. And the first time I ever came to a red light, it was on the hill, and a guy pulled right behind me. It wasn't on. At a town of 20,000, I got the guy right behind me. And man, I'll never forget going, man, to get that clutch thing right, this could be really, and what I was thinking more than anything, embarrassing. More than dangerous, more than crazy. You just didn't want to do that. As irony would have it, one of my sons was learning to drive while we were at home in Vicksburg, my hometown. And it was a flat place, but we pull out in the middle of an intersection and you cannot get that clutch to work right, and you're just sitting at the boom, and the car was dead. You know, and you can go, come on, man, come on. Yeah, you can, but we weren't in danger. But anyway, the bad news was there was more than one brother in the car. That was the bad news, because that's ammunition forever, okay? So, but you need to be a calming influence for your child. Now, I know that's huge. That's huge. That's a big statement. It's nerve-wracking enough for my children to learn how to drive without me increasing the anxiety. I mean, just going through it normally. You know it doesn't. Your job with your kids, and especially in those moments, is to be a non-anxious presence. That's really what you want to have. Jacob, is that right? Is that what parents need?
That sounds right.
Yeah, it sounds right, yeah.
Good to me.
Listen, your kids can feel your anxiety. They sense it. This is easier said than done. And it's because we don't really listen to wise teachers who say things like this. Don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in God? Believe in me. Don't be troubled. We don't think of wise teachers who say, don't be anxious for anything, but in everything, with prayer, supplication, and thanksgiving, let your prayers be made known to God. Those are called. I'm enjoying that kid right now. That's sweet. That's good. Dude, everybody needs an Arlo in their life.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. We forget the words. When he tells you, don't be anxious, you know what he then says, basically? You can make big requests of God. Let your prayer and supplication be made with thanksgiving. Ask big things. Don't be afraid. How about this one? Don't be afraid, I'm with you. Jesus says it all the time. So we have to be a calming influence for our kids. I'm saying things here that I did not always live, that I did not even approximate at times in my life. I'm talking about things that I blew through these warning signals, and I wasn't that at times. But at times I was. There were times when I had a kid come in one night, and he got a ticket for going 103 miles an hour. Yeah. And, I said, let's be chill. Let's be chill. Why don't look at John? Yeah.
His illustrations
I
are
was
great.
I was with a kid I get the news one day, Dad, I did something really stupid. I egged the car. Yeah. And it's $863 to get it painted and repaired. And we go through that. And you can do one or two things. You always have two choices at least. But I got to tell you, you walk with your kids through those things. I've been with them when they had times where they were in danger. And you still have to, I was not a calming influence when my son got struck by a car. She was. But she was. She was. I wasn't. I was going nuts. When the knife got stuck in the eye and went to the brain, I was the calming influence. She was not. That was interesting. So, you just don't know. You don't know. I know that when I had a son get his appendix ruptured and he had to have surgery, and it was dangerous, and doctors told us. He ended up having 3 that week, getting the sepsis out. But I remember when he was going in the elevator, I prayed with him, and they had to do it quick, so you weren't having, Pastor Dan didn't have long prayer.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, he looks at me, he gives me a thumbs up, and he goes, Daddy, however it goes, I'm okay. Man, that does something for you. We can hear God in the hard times, if we will listen. And so this is not a lesson to tell you be super spiritual. This class is called intentional parenting. If you don't intentionally know you need to be a calming influence, you will not be a calming influence unless you're a sloth, sleep, doing something like that, because we get amped. So how do you become a calm parent? So one more question I want to ask of you. What do you do to settle your spirit? What do you do? Can you have something that maybe you can help us here? What do you do to ground your faith and to get grounded so that you can be a calming influence? What do you do? Do you do anything that's good for you? Okay, go for it.
Well, specifically with anxiety for my kids, I really pray a lot for them and sort of surrender those anxieties so that when things come up, I'm like, yeah, we already prayed for this. Like, I didn't realize I was already praying ahead of time for that.
Fantastic.
And that helps me stay calm and not freak out because I'm like, God's got this. I just have to, usher through it.
I think that's one. I mentioned Becky being such a calming influence. Becky was praying for our children before we ever had children. God had given us promises before we ever had a pregnancy. God had told us the well-being of our sons would be great. And she could remind me, when the car thing happened especially, on that, I thought my son was dead, number one. But when that happened, she said, Danny, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. Man, I needed that. Because in the side, I hear a person on their porch say, should we call 911? And one of them says, I think it's too late. You hear those words. I'll never forget hearing those words. Never forget. And at the same time, I'll never forget her being over him, because I couldn't look at it. I was so afraid to see what I was saying. She is over him. And she said, Danny, let's take him to the hospital. We'll be there faster than an ambulance. He's going to be okay. Now, I get to the hospital, and I'm calm because I go to the bathroom and I'm throwing up. I'm having me a moment. But she's there. And, I didn't want to be with anybody. I want to be by myself. And I didn't have to be with anybody, so it was okay. But the reason I'm telling you this, you can't forecast the things you're going to face. Mm-hmm. Don't try to forecast them. Prepare your heart for whatever. That's really important. Because you can't, listen, your kids are not going to live your life. The things you're afraid your kids might get into, they're probably going to go another route because they've lived with you for a while. And the thing is, when parents say, well, I'm afraid my kid will go into whatever it is, partying, wild behavior, maybe not. But you can't plan for that, and don't forecast that and prophesy that for them. Mm-hmm. Don't do that. Be a calming influence. Because here's the thing. Can I give you a mantra here? God, you've got this. That's important to be able to say. What that is, be still and know that I'm God. Now, you can quote the Bible verse, that's fine, but sometimes that mantra is really good. And you know what? When people are talking to you that don't know Christ, that don't have a faith life, and they hear you say, God, you've got this, that makes sense to them. Say, be still and know that I'm God. They don't know the code language. But then you can unpack that with them later when they say, when you project that, how do you get that piece? And there you go. I always remember, there's a God who's got this. How do you know that? Well, you learn. And you quote Psalm 46:10. So,
can I add just one little thing onto that?
Yeah.
So, also one thing I've learned is, in addition to not forecasting the troubles that your children may get into, I've learned the hard way that you can't forecast the good things that your kids will have.
Exactly.
One of the biggest mistakes we made early on in parenting our oldest was basically creating dreams for him. They weren't his dreams, they were our dreams. And when he got old enough and wise enough to realize that his dreams and our dreams didn't match up, he felt like he was such a disappointment to us. And we're like, no, you're not a disappointment to us. But we did have to grieve and move beyond, what we thought this child would be or do in his life. Mm-hmm. And so I think that also, if you can let go of trying to create, or forecast for your children, that also reduces your anxieties as well.
That is huge. And you just said a huge thing. What she just said is not even in what she said. She said something very important. As we talked about it, we realized we had different dreams. They were talking. That's a key point we'll talk later about. That's a huge thing. Keep the communication going. But that we're not going there right now. But that is a great line. Yes, sir.
I was just that's awesome advice, because I think what it said for me too is just be careful what you say. Mm-hmm. To that, because there's stuff that we talk about, and then there's stuff that, it's I think you have to be, I found myself in that quandary realizing I probably shouldn't have shared that with my child, or, whatever. It's you have something where you're like, that may be true, and it may be what we want, or it may be this or that, but it's not really something I should speak over them. Right. You know what I mean? And so there's some things are just for you to pray for. Some things you treasure in your own heart. Some things you want or you pray for, but you don't necessarily share all that with your kids too. So I think that's always and in the moment it's always tough when you're trying to sort things out, I think.
Yeah, and if you are named Dan and you're a pastor, you will say things in prayer and in public sometimes that really should not be there. And you hurt, you embarrass, you can grieve, and you don't mean to. You didn't mean to at all. And it's not like you said, I'm deliberately going to go do this, but man, you have a great word, John. Guard who you are and what you're about. God's had to use that in my life recently, just to make sure that I can say, Lord, I want to speak words that are pleasing to you. And well, that's another talk, not that. Get your soul grounded though. If it's through, does anybody do anything else to ground your soul? Is different?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was going to say. If we're breathing, taking a breath, it depends on what we're talking about. Because there's sure. I'm away from a situation, but I'm thinking about my kids and I'm anxious about something. That's one thing. But then there's I'm in the heat of it. They're doing something I don't want them to do. Yeah. Now the whole realm of things, but my thing is to tend to drill down. I want to stop it or escalate that situation sometimes. So it's breathing, praying, and then I think just changing focus, the intentionality about what we're talking about with parenting is is this a teachable moment? How can I best help my child understand through this. Because when I shift my focus and I realize I'm just the parent and the guide and not in trying to control the whole thing, it opens up a lot of new possibilities where we can learn.
I was in the grocery store because I do the shopping in our family on that, so that's something I enjoy doing. But I was there and I heard a guy that had a little one that was kind of going wild, and he said, "Easy, Johnny, easy, Johnny." I said, "I appreciate you taking care of Johnny." He goes, "I'm Johnny." I love that. Yeah. He goes, "That's Bobby. I'm Johnny." I said, "That's great, dude." But anyway. Yeah, that's almost what you're talking about, right? Yeah. Easy. I mean, easy.
It takes a degree of self-awareness when you're in those moments, which, if you're a fiery personality like some of us in this room, no names to be mentioned, it's really hard to do that because you're so reactionary. And I just had a situation with my daughter last night where she's almost 12, so I don't need to tell you what she's like half the time. And it's just having so much frustration with her sports right now, and she was just melting down. And my initial reaction was like, "Oh my gosh, what is that?" Like, I was reacting to her. And I had to, I had to be self-aware in that moment to be like, okay, this is not helping anything. I need to counteract what she's going through. So.
And that's when we funnel our anxiety we just have to be a calming presence. It's smart.
Treat them like toddlers.
Winston Churchill said this when he was under great strain in the war. They asked him, how he dealt with things. He said, "Well, I try to rest every day. I get some rest." And then he said this, "Fatigue makes cowards of us all." Mm-hmm. And it does. Mm-hmm. And look, in parenting, you can't choose your sleeping hours. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, that's with grown kids too. Mm-hmm. I will say this will not be an encouraging line, but it should be one day, maybe. It'll help you pray more. When your kids are that age, when they're Arlen, you have little problems. Mm-hmm. When they get to be 20, 30, 40, you have big problems. Mm-hmm. And I mean, those are the things, you never really totally launch your kids. Even in the great new day of the new heavens and new earth, we shall know as we are known. And the thing is, that doesn't mean we're all going to be clumped in happy family groups and all that, but no, we're going to know the influence we pour into people's lives. We don't see that today, but man, it's going to be some kind of awesome. I do know that. So we all need rest for our soul, and so that idea of getting grounded. Imagine, I know this guy over here. He takes walks in the morning, and he journals. Now, whether he thinks that's grounding him or not, it is. I mean, yeah, and it's just important for you to have something you do that gets you grounded on a regular basis when you're not in frantic trying to be grounded. Get grounded before you need to be grounded. I love watching the Artemis space launch and not launch and all those things. But the reason they know that they're not going to have a panic is they know what they're looking for and what it needs to do. They're grounded. It's not like, oh, didn't see that. Challenger surprised us. We didn't see that coming. And so that's what we need to understand. Get grounded before the thing happens. Okay? So, because it will happen. Mantras are helpful. I saw one yesterday in one of my daughter's homes. And I call them daughters because the daughters of my marriage. That's what they are for me. But it said this: one little positive thought has the capacity to change your entire day. And that is so true. And I saw that and I said, good mantra. I like that. Enough that I wrote it down. You got it, God. One that goes for me, Psalm 56:3 is so helpful. When I'm afraid, I will put my trust in you. Because you're going to be afraid. It doesn't say if I'm afraid. When you're afraid, I will put my trust in you. And that helps me when I have any kind of fear. And that lets me know Jesus is always saying, don't be afraid. I've got this. I will put my trust in you. And I love Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? I love that. But that's just about where you're trafficking. You can get grounded. I want to encourage you, write your prayers out. If you don't journal, write prayers. You will not see how many prayers God answers in your life if you don't record some of them. You just won't do it. If you get a psalm pattern, I think the Psalms are the emotional book in the Bible. It goes to the depths and the heights. But I read 5 Psalms a day. I read, like today is what day of the week, month? Is it? 18th. Okay? So I read Psalm 18, 48, 78, which is one of my favorite Psalm 78, last 3 verses. But then I do 108 and then I do 138. Okay? So I read, and I do that for a reason. I used to read 1 through 5 on day 1, 6 through 10 on day 2, 11 through 15. I used to do it that way. But then I was taught to do it that way. But then when it got in the 80s, I wanted to commit suicide because they're all depressing. The Psalms have 5 books of Psalms. If you don't know how the Hebrews wrote it, it's 5 different books of Psalms, and they have different heights, different depths, different things. So it gives you a balance. But I do that, and what I do when I get an encouraging word from God, and whatever I'm reading, if I'm using a U Bible, which I don't like it for devotional life so much, but I do the Psalms with it, and I do it on purpose. When I see something that hits it, I underline it, I email it to myself, or I text it to myself. And therefore, I'm reminded of that during the day. I can look back and see that and say, what do you got? I need to hear this again. I need to put it in my soul. So if it's a hard copy, circle it, write it down, keep a look. And then maybe do one more thing. Look at the things that really do give you anxiety. Whether it's fear, whatever it might be, do a word study on that. And just look it up in Scripture. Just Google, what does the Bible say about worry? Bang. And you'll get a bunch of verses. Google is a spiritual tool. Sometimes it is a devilish tool, okay? But you can find some good things there. And so don't be afraid to use that resource. It's like a concordance without being precise, so it's good. Books are helpful. You can read a book, but your best insights will come from your time with God. Your best insight, the things that He tells you. He's the physician. He's the healer. He's the shepherd. He's the maker of life. He's the peace. Jesus is our peace. So He is the center of it. Now, after you do your calming work, okay, we're doing some practices. Let's examine your life just for a minute, the interior. Because the interior of your soul, now think of your body as a space, okay, because you have your physical. Your soul has material in it that you take into any space you go into. That's why I said be a calming presence. I didn't say get calm. Be a calming presence. When you walk into your house, you feel certain things. And matter of fact, you feel what we put into it. We feel the presences we put there. I can't stress that enough. You can't expect to be delivered from pain and insecurity, the addiction to recognition, that craving for approval that we might have, if you do not work them out. You got to do the interior work. You've got to rearrange the furniture in your space. And what we want to say, oh God, take that away. Oh, that it was that simple. Okay? The only thing that God ever took away from us without any effort is our sin. God did. Now we have to work on His hold on us. Arlo's teaching us. He's trying to do that. But you have to work it. Remember what Jesus said when He came out and the boys, He comes from the Mount of Transfiguration. He comes down into the valley. And the disciples are there. Peter, James, and John are with Him on the mountain. The others are down there. And they're saying, this man's got a sick boy. And they don't really say it. His father does. He said, I brought my son, and your disciples couldn't cast this thing out. They couldn't hear it. And Jesus said, you have little faith, not to the dad, to the son. He said, this, and then that afterwards, they said, how did you get that out? He said, this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. What Jesus is saying? I was grounded. Whatever you want to say, prayer is a grounding tool. Fasting is a grounding tool. Fasting is when you deprive yourself, typically of food, but it can be of TV, it can be of screen space, it can be of any number of things. But you take a time away from that so that you can sharpen your perception of God. And you really don't sometimes immediately know that you're getting more perceptive, but it happens. And you start seeing God in more different things. I'm going to teach a little bit about that this morning in the message. But these things have to be worked out, so it takes work. So take check of your interior. Maybe get a trusted friend to help you and say, do I have blind spots in my life that I'm missing? Now that's a huge vulnerability. If you see a therapist, you could ask that of a therapist. That would be a good thing to say. And by the way, I was trained to believe only weak people went to therapists. I was trained that. Not only, my family didn't say that, because in Mississippi, you had no therapist. You could talk to the cow. You didn't have a therapist. You just didn't have them there. But when I moved to Pittsburgh and I'm doing my training in seminary it's kind of like, well, God's our psychiatry, all we need is the Holy Spirit, all we need is Jesus, all we need. And there's a good word for that. It's a Greek word. It's called baloney. And, that's just not true. And so, you get to a place and you're like, it's just me and Jesus, we got it. Jesus never gave that kind of talk. He said, I can help you do anything, but he always called us to walk with others. The one thing about this class, Cora gave us some lessons today. Chantel gave us some lessons today. John gave us some lessons today. We're all giving each other lessons. Arlo gave us some lessons today. Amelia, you gave us some lessons today. Everything about that's really, really important. So take a look at your interior, have a trusted friend, and maybe your spouse really isn't the best person to do this for you, quite honestly. But is there any attitude, is there any personality quirk that I might need to work on? Yeah, that's big. Okay. I can just stop the class right now. I dropped the mic. That's a mic dropper right there, okay? Now, the main thing is this. Here's the thing. Be a calming influence for your child. To be emotionally, spiritually healthy means that you're calming. That's what that means. It's emotional health and spiritual health. A lot of people are so spiritual, they give you anxiety. Have you ever noticed that? When I work with people who are going through grief, and I hear them go, we're all right, man, the Lord is our strength and our shield. And I'm going like, you are going nuts. And you're just quoting scripture to act like you're not going nuts. Those are not pop-off valves. Those verses are not something that you let go that way. No. Because I'm going to tell you, sometimes you don't feel those things. And when you don't feel, they're still true. But if you've been kind of faking it and quoting that just so it'll get you through, and you're not really getting there. Jesus knew the scriptures. He quoted them, to our knowledge, very little when we hear him talk. You don't hear Jesus going like, oh, help me, I got Peter coming up here. You never hear him going like, I got a verse for Judas. He knew all about Judas. He saw his tendencies. He chose him for those tendencies. I think Jesus chose Judas to give him every chance in the world to see that he did not need to have money, fame, and position to be a great man. I think Judas had ambition, the wrong kind, but I think Jesus called him because God can use your ambition when you surrender to him. If it's not surrendered, it's dangerous. Flat dangerous. No. Work out. Now, here's another point here. Okay? I'm calming. Work out whatever you need to work out so your kid won't have to work that out. Because they're going to have to work through their own stuff. If they have to work through your stuff because you didn't work it out, that's really hard. It's really, really hard. Everything that you work out is something your kids won't have to work out. I mean, they may, but it'll be theirs. It's not your thing. And so many parents, they've taken their broken dreams and they project them to their kids by giving them great dreams or whatever that is. And we have to realize, I'm not God of my kid's life. I'm a parent. Yeah. We all have wounds and pains we have to work out. You know when you feel insecure. You know what makes you, there's triggers in you that get you. Trigger's been a word that's been so misused, people don't like to use it, but trigger's a good word. There's things in you that set you off, whether you call it a fuse, whatever it is. To me, trigger's a good word. I don't like the way it's used to attack people. I don't like that. You trigger me, and I don't like that kind of thing. But listen, you know when you know when it's coming. And so, whether it's your fear, insecurity, unreconciled pain, unanswered prayer, if it's your family origin, your background that you have, if it's stress about money, it can be difficult relationships, it can be failures that have shamed you, it can be job conditions. We all have stuff. We all have stuff. And here's the thing, as a job as a parent, you work through your stuff so your kids won't have to. That's really important. I wish I knew that lesson before I ever had children. Sure. And here's the deal. When you do that, every tiny little step that you take into freedom, into health, into wholeness, is one more thing your kid will not have to live with now or work through later. That's just huge. That's huge. And well-meaning parents can transfer their things to the kids without knowing it and not meaning it. But you realize, I do it with myself. I said, that's my dad talking. You know, I realized I'm doing that for Joe, you know, in a very real sense. And confessionally here, my mother helped me work things through. My dad didn't talk a lot. He showed things and he led that way. But, you know, I needed him to work through some things with me. And I only got to work through that the last 8 years of his life. And I'm grateful for those 8 years because they closed with a boom, man. I mean, my dad's last words he ever said to me, I was telling him I was having heart surgery. And I came down to tell him, so I went to him on the phone. And Dad had not spoken in a long time because the Parkinson's took it away. And I said, Dad, I just want to tell you, you know, I'm having surgery. And I'm going to be fine. I know that. But I didn't want you to hear that on the phone. And I'll never forget what he said. Last words, I want to be with you. Best last words, I mean, just incredible. I want to be with you. And I said, Dad, you're always with me. And you know, when I got rolled in that room, those words came to me again. I want to be with you. And Dad was not dead, he died 20 days, or a month later. But, you know, that's worth it. Now, the thing is, Dad and I had to work through a bunch of crap before we could get to that point. And I had 5 years going down every month, and because I didn't have all my kids, because I didn't have grandkids, I could talk to Dad. It was just Dad, and we were able to talk. Why didn't you talk to me about this or that? And he goes, oh, I didn't know how. And you know, that's a good answer. That's real good. For his age, where he was, he didn't know how. My dad didn't do that. And he goes, I can't believe you're doing it. My dad, he said, this is helping me. So, you know, healing can come, but you got to work at it. It's not going to happen just because you pray for it. And I'm not minimizing prayer. But prayer doesn't stop you from doing the hard work. We're asking God to do the hard work. And God said, no. Work out your own salvation. Yeah, that's in there. Do it with fear and trembling, because you realize, I may make a mistake, but that's why you call God. Lead me in this. Does that make sense? If you do that, you will be liberated and your kids will be liberated. Your kids will know it. They'll benefit from it. They'll take healthy steps because of it. Every step into calm affects the home atmosphere you have. It just does. It just does. This is all building to some bigger things. But man, if you do these things, it guides it into where we evolve. We're growing. We're transforming. It's beautiful. Whatever is gnawing at your soul, whatever owns your soul, will crawl into your home and stay there unless you don't give it space. And you're not in denial, but you just have to realize, I'm going to create a healthy environment in this place we call home. It's important. Your kid, by the way, your kids know what's in that space of your home. They know it. Kids know. They always know. They may not articulate it, but they pick it up. And they can smell it and they feel it. A kid can feel anger and judgment when they walk into the house. They can. They can also feel love and acceptance. By the way, and it's not because you did something wrong you feel anger and judgment. Guess what? The prodigal son's older brother who never left home, who stayed there, did all the stuff, he felt anger and judgment in the house. The son came home. The one that came home, he felt acceptance and love in the house. So the thing is, if we leave room, you know, the dad obviously had not done enough work with his older boy in that sense. And he said, son, I've always been with you. But you got to be willing to name these things. By the way, the other thing, if you can read your kids know what's in your house before you know. Oftentimes, you can. If your kid's being anxious and they're worried, so that's probably because they're in an environment there. I mean, that happens, and so we have to work on those things. And maybe it's a school that created that, or their friends, but you got to be aware of that so that you pick it up when it comes in, and don't act like, well, that's not a big deal. That's where we ground them too. Okay, so work on that in your heart. When I was at home this past week, I was talking to my two sisters. And one of them knew more about what went through here in March this past year that we were dealing with as a church than the other. And I'll never forget, I was kind of filling in my sister with some things. As we were talking, she said to me, I was worried for you. She said, you changed during that time. She said, where you usually, you would call, we would talk, or you'd send text, and then she said, you were giving one-word answers, you were giving emojis back, and she said, you weren't neglecting us, but she said, I knew something. She said, man, I just wish I'd known more so I could have prayed for you. But she said, it changed you. And when she said that, I went like, what have I been projecting on people at home? You know, I think I'm doing okay, but I got to tell you, we have to process this stuff, don't we? Yeah, we got to process it. It's not going to go away, just you and God. Now, I mean, you and God can do that if you're doing it, if you're really letting Him probe your soul. But you know, a good friend helps you do that better. So, let's finish. Be a calming influence means don't dump on your kids your anxiety, the pressure for the best grades, the dream they ought to have. Don't push the coach for more playing time. Don't go and get the band director and say, I want my kid to have a better spot. Look, I know he's really good. He's really good. I read a study the other day, because I kind of prepare for some of these classes, you know, work on that. And I was reading the study. And I can't believe this when I read it, but I do believe it. The whole thing with helicopter parents and just the whole thing, and you know, then you got snowplow parents who don't even have any obstacles. They just get them all out of the way. There's a study happening. It's happening enough. There's a study that parents of grown children are calling their bosses where they work to see how their kids doing, you know, how their grown child's doing in their work. I went like, so I decided I was going to call and check on my boys.
There's a reason I don't give you that number.
Yeah. I went like, how unhealthy is this? I mean, how crazy are we? Now, clearly, these people had not done the interior work, and they had also not prayed for their children. There was a lot of problems. But isn't that a nutty thing? When I read that, I read it like 3 times. I said, that can't be what I think I'm reading, but it was what I was reading.
That's anxiety-driven behavior.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, here's the thing, as a parent, most of the things we're anxious about are our things, not their things.
Yeah.
That's really important to remember. The things we get anxious about are not their things, they're our things. Your kids have enough anxious elements in life. What are the anxieties your kids deal with today that we never thought about? That you never, and look, you're a generation and a half behind me. But what are things that your kids have any concern about that you never had a concern about? Name a few. Let's talk that.
Their social media presence.
Oh, yeah.
Social media presence. It's incredible. You know, I don't know what I would do with that. Quite honestly, I'm glad I'm not a parent right now. I mean that in a very real sense. Okay, that's it. What else?
Riding the bus to school.
Been there, done that. I've had that one. So some kids are bound up there and they just love it. Some kids feel like Forrest Gump getting home and they can't get a seat. You know, I literally got called to the principal's office when I was in the 5th grade. And Miss Doty called me into her office and said, "Why did you try to kiss that girl on the bus yesterday?" I said, "I didn't." Well, they say you did, and you're going to get in big trouble. And then I sat there, I could not remember what happened. I just was going, what in the world? Then later I'm talking to one of my buddies and I said, man, I'm in trouble because they kissed a girl, tried to kiss a girl. And he goes like, no, you didn't. We went to Boy Scouts. We weren't even on the bus on the way home yesterday. Thank God. But I was in such a shock, you know, I couldn't even remember that the day before I'd gone to Scouts, so I wasn't even there, you know. But your kids have anxious elements. Do you think they're anxious about the world we live in?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have much more exposure to the news, commentary on the news,
Yeah.
than we ever did as kids.
Yeah. It's huge. You know, I can remember my dad would read 2 newspapers a day. I'd read 2 newspapers a day. How crazy is that? Sins of the father. But anyway, but my dad also watched the evening news every night. And it was a 30-minute deal. Orderly done. Was news. Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, Hunt Neely Brinkley, these guys did it. And it was not the media show you see today. It wasn't even close. We watched the news. Matter of fact, news never made money. Matter of fact, Dan Rather, who is a great reporter and a great newsman, but incredible journalist work, he said, I created the problem. And he says, I hate it that I created the problem. Because he said, I started a thing called 60 Minutes. And we called it CBS Reports. And he said, we started doing in-depth journalistic reporting on different issues. And he said, that made money. When news started making money, all hell broke loose. Because then somebody wanted to get a point or whatever it is. You know? And he says, the thing that I hate seeing that has happened, I made it. I didn't mean to make it. It's unintended consequence because I was doing good work and I thought everybody ought to hear it. So, you know, we live in a world where the best intentions can lead the wrong way and all that, but our kids live in that world. And it's like you can't shield them from all that. You just can't do it. By the way, Kids worry about environmental concerns. I mean, I hear people, and I don't mean that in a crazy way, but my kids are a generation removed, but my grandkids, they care about the environment.
Yeah.
They do. My kids didn't so much because I didn't teach them that value. You didn't do that 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But that's a big deal today. And if we say we recycle, they go, yeah, well, sure. They want to. They believe they have a responsibility, which is a good thing. But there's a concern, and it can be overstated, whatever. But you got to deal with the concern and not just say, well, that's not a big deal. That doesn't deal with the concern at all.
There's a new one that came up recently with my kids. They have a lot of anxiety of what the future is going to look like because technology and the job market and professions are changing so rapidly, and they're being told at school the jobs that exist today won't exist when you're an adult, and so they feel this like intense overwhelm to have a plan for their life, but they don't know how to plan
Into an unknown future.
Right, because nobody knows what it's going to look like when they're there.
When I was launching out, you would get a job and you'd work for that company for 50 years, 40 years, whatever it is. You'd get to go watch. I mean, that was the thing. Now I was a pastor, so that means you'd move every 2 years, but which I didn't do that. But the thing is that happened, and I've seen that happen. My boys have had numerous jobs, and it's standard. It's not odd to change jobs. That can be traumatic changing them. I prayed to some of you about that. As a matter of fact, I prayed with most of you about that at different points in your life. But so that's do your kids have any anxiety, or do you have anxiety about school shootings, on anything on that line? You don't ever fear it till it comes to you. But I got to tell you, I've had kids here. Is this building safe? Mm-hmm. Is this building safe? I'm not sure what prompted the question because I'm not the parent. But kids need to feel safe. Mm-hmm. They need to feel that, and they don't feel safe because you're doting on them. That's not the thing. You can feel safe anywhere if you're taught security and where our trust is, and what we project to our homes. So,
we can control that.
No.
We can though.
Yeah.
We in our home I intentionally don't listen to the news when they're around.
Yeah.
We never watch the news. It's almost like the complete opposite pendulum. Like it's the point where I have a 12-year-old who doesn't know what's going on in the world, and I'm like, oh, I need to make sure he's aware of some things. Mm-hmm. So I'm like curating what I share with him just so he can begin to get a perspective. But
that is so wise. And I want to say, you're going to hear a thing on probably, I think it's number 7. But the thing, you are the key central figure in your kid's life. You are. You're critically important.
Were you gonna say anything?
I didn't mean to butt in.
We had a school, our first school. They actually had to bring in current events, and I had very anxious children after that because they're like, oh my God, what can we do with this?
Yeah.
And in our new school, it's completely devoid of that, except that they're training them to be able to approach some problems. But there's such a huge difference when they're exposed and when they're not exposed.
Mm-hmm. Becky and I did home ed with our kids. Johnny started school in classroom when he was in the 11th grade when we moved here. And I got to tell you, we did not do that to shield them from everything. And we definitely didn't do it to say schools are bad. I believed in our school system and participated with it. But it's just, make sure you don't do this. Don't amplify your kids' concerns. Soothe them. Be a calming influence and direct your kids' thinking in a positive direction. Remember, Jesus was walking on the waves, okay? The disciples see the waves, they see Jesus. You've got to choose where you're going to look. When Peter got out on the water, Jesus said, come on. And as long as he kept doing that, he was fine. He was walking on water. It's when he took his eyes and put them on the waves. And so, I want to be clear that I'm not saying you can run from these things. We don't live in a monastic system. And by the way, the monastic system doesn't work either because it'll follow you. Things happen, okay? So there is no safe place, but you can have a secure place. And that's the thing. In Jesus, there is safety and security, and in your wisdom, there is security for decision making and those things. So direct your kids in a positive direction. Don't tell them there's no waves. There's waves. But there's Jesus out here too. You know what? And we can do what we need to do. You see the hungry crowd. That gave everybody anxiety. Unless you're looking at Jesus and he's going like, I can handle this. I can handle this. And that's so important. Be wise and proactive in being calm. That's the big lesson today. Your kids will be blessed by that. So, When you do teach your child how to drive, you're going to be the one that goes like, this is nerve-wracking. I appreciate the anxiety you have, it's excitement, but you know what? Look, unless you do something really bad, we're all okay. And you're not going to do that because you're my child, and we're good with you.
I remember the voice just the first time I was on more of a highway, right? And I remember just hearing, hold your lane. Just hold your lane. Everything else will be all right. Keep your eyes in front of you, obviously. Don't rear end anybody. But it's like, because it was like going 40 was like going 140, First time when you're driving, it was like, what is going on? What is going on? And I remember there was the soothing voice that time where where all I remember hearing is just hold your lane. You're like, all right, so there's one central thing too that you're now able to focus on. That focused all that anxiety onto one task. And that was really good parenting and got me through that. And then it's like, okay, I survived that. I guess we're all right. We'll figure out the next steps, But yeah, so.
Thank you, John. That's a good illustration. Hey, listen, your kids need a quiet calm. They just need to have that in their heart. They have it. Psalm 40. We'll read just a minute. I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and He turned to me, and He heard my cry. He lifted me out of a pit of despair, out of the mud, out of the mire. He set my feet on solid ground, steadied me as I walked along, and He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to Himself. Many will see what He's done, they'll be amazed, and they'll put their trust in the Lord. Oh, the joys of those who trust the Lord, who have no confidence in the proud of those who worship idols. Oh, my Lord, my God, You have performed many wonders for us. Your plans are too numerous for us to list. You have no equal. If I tried to recite all Your wonderful deeds, I could never come to the end of them. You take no delight in sacrifice or offerings. Now that You've made me listen, I finally understand. You don't require burnt offerings. You don't require sin offerings. You say, You come. And I say, I come, Lord. I take joy in doing Your will, my God. For Your instructions are in my heart. It's really interesting. And He closes with this, Lord, please come rescue me. Come help me. There's 12 verses in between there. May those who are trying to destroy me be frustrated. May they be humiliated. They're saying, I've got You now. But may all who search for You be filled with gladness and filled with joy. May those who love Your salvation repeat regularly, the Lord is great. As for me, I'm poor and needy. Yet the Lord keeps me in His thoughts. You are my helper. You are my Savior. Do not delay. I love that psalm because it carries the gamut. It's not like, well, I just trust in God and everything's cool. He said, I'm in the miry clay and You pull me out. And I'm out of the clay now, but you know what? I've got somebody after my butt and it's scaring me. Would You deliver me? So that's what being grounded is. It's not that you don't go through it. No, in the midst of it, we can settle our feet on solid ground. Here's the thing. You feel your anxiety. That's why your blood pressure goes up. That's why you start sweating. That's why, here's the thing. Here's what you want to project to your kids. You ready? This is very simple. The calm. Here's this. I'm committed to You, and I can absorb the shock with You. That you can't totally absorb it for them. You can somewhat, but I can absorb the shock with You. And I'm bigger than you, so I can take more of it. Okay? And I've been there. I had a parent tell me one time, they said, if we do that, that's going to tell them that we have insecurities. I said, bingo, that's good. They said, but if you have faith, you should never have insecurities. I said, that means you won't have faith if you believe that. Because you will always have insecurities. As believers, we don't have a magic bullet. We have a great Savior. And we can trust Him. Not blindly. It's not, Jesus, take the wheel. Sometimes you have to say that, okay? But that's not a good motto to live by. Let go and let God. That's a path to disaster. What it is, trust in the Lord to do good. Dwell in the land. Cultivate faithfulness. I love that song. But it's important for us. And by the way, that's right before it says, delight your heart in the Lord, and He'll give you the desire of your heart. If you don't cultivate the land and feed faithfulness, your desires will be off center. But we can do that in Christ. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. This is the second lesson an observation. First was enjoy your kids. Be a calming presence for your children. I had 4 more listed today, but we didn't get there. Okay, I was ready to go for a while. But one closing word. This is stuff that I just have taught in the past, but I want to just say this. Every one of us that's here, you have a child within you that's kind of afraid. We're not just, we're adults, but we've still got some little child in us. And you'll hear that child every now and again. And the other thing, just parenting is not an innate skill. You just, no, and it's also not a thing you just get in books. No, you got to be wise, and you look, and this is important, being with people. Each one of you helped the other today. Thank you. And that's something you realize, that parenting is not just something you do, it's who you are. It's really who you are. And we've got a great role model. We have a Father who will never, ever, ever leave us nor forsake us. And He'll tell you and me, be cool, I got it. So let's be calm, do good. Does that make sense? Let me pray with you before we go. Father, thank you for your love. You've been with us today, and we know it, and we're grateful. In Jesus' name, help us to be parents who enjoy our kids, and we also are calming influence for our kids. If we do that for them, we'll do it for others, and you'll use us to be peacemakers. In Christ's name, bless each one of these here. They're here because they're hungry. Fill them. In Jesus' name.